Viewers, welcome to the show Real Talk with your host Amjad Ditter. Today's no different. We have another guest who is a multi-award winner, may I let you know. And today's topic is about leadership and especially women in leadership. The lines will be open. Telephone numbers 01274 214 299. It's also going to be live streamed on YouTube on IQRA TV. They mentioned the word leadership, and a lot of sentiments will come to mind regarding leadership, and we'll have a certain image that will forefront this regarding what we believe to be leadership. And in my opinion, and what I've seen, there's not many, especially our community, and I say our community, from the BME community, who have been put on a pedestal. And I don't say that in a negative effect of putting them there to be admired and just as a status, but they should be the norm and not the exception. So my guest today is Habiba Zaman, who is a multi-award winner. And when I say multi-award, I'm going to let her introduce herself and the award she's got, because some of these acronyms that even I can't pronounce and get them out, and I don't even know what they even stand for really. So without further ado, I'm going to go over to Habiba and introduce her to the show. Habiba, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Amjad.
Thank you for coming, and I know how busy you are, so thank you for taking time out and coming onto the show, because I think the topic is very relevant.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for inviting me, and I feel quite honoured being part of the show tonight. My awards have been coming in since maybe 2005. I've been a community activist for almost 30 years now, and the first recognition was through the Surveyor Foundation as a woman in leadership role in 2005. And again, at that time, I was involved in many sort of voluntary organisations, where one in particular where my career started from was the Awaz newspaper, which was a campaigning organisation and writing community news locally. From that passion sort of stemmed on to getting involved in some of the women's work that was out there in the community, because I was one of the first women to be part of, from the BME community, to be part of the organisation. So that sort of led my passion into going into more women's work. In terms of going into which area, that was a bit of a challenge, because at that time women weren't seen as the ones that would be going out and becoming sort of leaders or involved in some of the roles that I was wanting to go into. From that, I went into sort of doing development work and youth work, particularly with young girls, looking at some of the mainstream curriculum things that were around at the time. And again, it was sort of relationship development, health and education, health and well-being. So my passion has really grown from that sort of organisation. And the people that were involved in that organisation have always been my backbone. Bless them, they're still around. I can still contact them for any advice, any information. They're prominent individuals in those communities, and they hold a lot of respect for me, and vice versa. So for me to have that sort of support within the local community was a very challenging issue at the time, which led me to go into doing youth and community work, and then going on to specific sort of organisations like the Kirklees Women's Refuge. I helped develop that and became a management member. I went on to helping the Housing Association, Sadlerlock Housing Association, served on the committee for many years there. Mill and Day Centre, working with the elderly. Again, that was close contact with some of these colleagues who were involved in developing that work. More recently, I picked up the award from the Kirklees Women's Alliance for Outstanding Woman in the Community, and then I went on to receiving the British Empire Medal in 2014 in the Queen's Birthday Honours list, and then 2015 I got the British Community Honours Award from the House of Lords, and that was for connecting communities and bringing communities together. And again, all of this has been possible with the support of my family, and particularly my mother, who, bless her, I've taken time out now from work to look after her, but she's been there for me all her life and supporting me and my two sons. And without her support, I wouldn't be where I was today.
It's always refreshing and humbling to hear the sentiments of thanking your parents for where you are. And I say that on every show. Never bite the hand that fed you. You know, always stay humble, and it really is. I mean, you've achieved a lot, if I may say so. You know, and you've been credited for it. You know, which is granted. However, is this hereditary? Is this the sort of line of work your family's gone through in the past, or you were the one who's come into this work and for some reason you've had this passion and taken this on? Because it wasn't seen as a norm, like you mentioned, in your generation, your era, when it happened. You know, so why journalists? Why this sort of work?
Well, it was really it was a paid position that I got with the Awards newspaper, and then I've sort of nurtured other women and girls within my family that have to some extent followed my footsteps and gone into further education, and I've got a fantastic little niece at the moment who I'm nurturing and taking around with me to many of the campaign sessions that I'm going to, you know, in the local community. So again, talking to her mum and trying to get her more excited about some of the real issues that are going on in our communities. We do have younger role models that are come up and coming within our communities. I'm also part of the UK Education Faith Foundation, which my sister's running, a charity in Oldham, feeding the homeless. So some of that has rubbed off with my siblings that have gone into similar work, charity work, and supporting disadvantaged sort of communities up and down the country.
There's a lot going on, and I don't know how you find the time to do it all, but credit to you for managing it. One of the things, one of the ideas and the setup that you did was the domestic refuge, is it? Domestic violence refuge?
Domestic violence refuge, yeah.
Can you talk through the domestic violence refuge, and was it targeted at specific community groups, or was it everybody who was looked after?
No, within the group that I was in at the time, we were finding that there was many BME women that were being fled through domestic violence up and down the country. There was nothing within the Kirklees area. So we campaigned to get some land within the area and funding to actually get the purpose-built refuge built and manage the services within that. At the moment, you know, we are catering specifically for BME women within the area, which is the only sort of refuge that's there.
So in this Kirklees region with the demographics, I don't say it was about 2.2 million in West Yorkshire alone, but if you concentrate on one aspect, how many numbers overall, how many women would you say visit this centre?
It varies, and you know, depending on the vulnerability of the individual that's going into the refuge, the coordinators will decide which is the best refuge for them to be staying at. Because again, you've got to understand that, you know, it's not seen as the norm for a woman to pick up her belongings and flee that home. It's not an easy task to do, and then having to survive as a single parent, maybe with children and no family support. At times there's women that have come from abroad that may not have any family within the UK, so they've got to set up their own support networks. So going into a refuge isn't an easy option for them, and then having to be rehoused somewhere again is not an easy task for that individual. So it would very much depend on the coordinators to analyse individual situations and make that assessment on that individual, whether they stay within the locality or whether they move out into another area.
What sort of problems have these people faced in their lives? It's not just all physical violence, is it, surely?
No, it varies, and again, you know, we've got to take responsibility as a community as to what is happening within our communities. It can be emotional abuse, it can be physical abuse, and it could be just mental torture that's going on with the extended families. We have to recognise that particularly women that are coming from abroad are self-harming themselves at the moment.
Wow.
You know, I'm coming across a number of women that have no alternative but to harm themselves, because that's the only way they feel their voice is going to be heard. So when we're not acknowledging the issues within our own communities, you know, how are we actually wanting to address the problems in the wider community? We've got to look within our own families and extended families, what is actually going on. We can sit back and have a joke about it, that so-and-so's this and so-and-so's that, but are we actually addressing the mental torture that individual may be going through?
it is mental torture, and it's very deep, like you mentioned, and there's a stigma attached, isn't there? And there's also a perception if someone's been divorced or someone's left home, especially if it's a female and it's come from a BME background. There's some sort of a perception and a stigma attached to that individual. You couldn't make it work. Maybe it's your fault. You know, I'm not passing the blame here, but as a society, especially the community, and I'm Mr. Cynical and I put my hands up to that. But we do have this, and this has been going on for years. Why haven't we caught up and moved on, in your humble opinion? I've got my views, and I mean, I share mine openly every time I do the show. But what can we do to highlight this issue more, other than bury it under the carpet and it's someone else's problem? If someone slit the wrist, or there's a cry for help, well, that's more than serious, and we're going to push that under the carpet, and then there's no alternative left for them. And for them to have that only option proves to me that they've got no faith in the system, they don't know what else to do, and they've probably been brainwashed to say if you report it, they won't take you serious. Maybe that's just me.
But to some extent you are right, because if we look at some of the vulnerable women that I'm coming across, they may not be part of the system, they may not have children, so they can't be part of like the school system, know the education system, know who to contact. They may not be connected to any of the networks or the community organisations that are in their community. So they might speak to a neighbour, and once they've spoken to that neighbour, it's the dishonour and the shame that they've brought on that family. And we don't acknowledge that these are real issues that individual is going through, and it'll be again targeting that family, that it's the upbringing, and maybe it's the family, that the way she's been raised, that she can't take the pressure that's in the kitchen. But again, we're not actually looking at the role of that particular woman in that family. We're expecting them to deal with extended family issues, or deal with all the family that's within that house, whereas her responsibility is to her husband and her children. And until we don't get that right, we're not going to move on as a community.
I mean, I had to have a smirk when you mentioned the woman and the kitchen. It's like, as a community, and I completely get that, the role of a woman is not to be the slave as such, and to do everything for us men. And they can be independent, can't they? And this is the key thing I mean when I say the people who come and visit your refuge centres, I'm guessing they're all not housewives, housebound. I bet there's some of them there who are independent, who have a persona, who have a different personality. Once they go behind closed doors, they're a completely different person. And in public, they put up a face or put up a show just so they don't get them remarks, don't get them insults. And it's like living two different lives.
Of course, you're right. And in terms of the dishonour, that is the biggest thing that we need to deal with. That is our biggest issue, because we continuously look at what others are going to say. And in some topics, we'll say, well, it doesn't matter what anybody's going to say, but then there's others that, particularly where the control is on the female, we do have that we sort of concentrate on the bigger picture, what a community is about and what they're going to talk about. But then, as a community, we do need to move on, because we're not supporting that individual. And fair enough, we kind of like believe that women are the homemakers, and they are the makers of those communities, families, etc. But then how much support do we actually give that individual? Because any instance that may happen within the family, you get the extended family involved, and then it always comes down to that individual having to save the face of that family, because it's always a woman's respect. So for decades we've been through this, and how long are we going to continue that? Because until women don't support women and the families don't begin to support the families, we're going to be in that bubble.
So the cliche of behind every successful man is the hard work of a woman has never been true. It has been true, but it just goes to show it's not only the elders that need to take responsibility, it's women on women, as you mentioned. They need to be supporting their own, equality, gender equality side of things, rather than just passing the buck on to somebody else. But is this a cultural issue, or have you seen this in other groups as well, or is it just specifically, generally, in the BME communities?
I'd say it's more in the BME communities, whereas within the white communities, I do see that they'll move on. Generally, something will happen, and the extended family won't have any contact with them, because they'll just leave them to it. Whereas within the BME communities, particularly from my experience of the Pakistani community, we will, as women, we will torture other women. We will have that control over them. As mother-in-laws, we'll want to make sure that, our sons have a certain role and our daughter-in-laws will have a certain role. But, at some point, we need to compromise with the families and move on, which we're not doing. And I can't really see why we're not doing, because on the one hand, we're trying to show the younger generation that, we've moved on, we're modern, and we have a modern way of thinking. But then we seem to hold on tightly to this culture that we've inherited from back home.
Yes, and you mentioned back home, well, some of these groups, their home is here. And second, third generation, and we still attach yourself to certain values. And there's a time and a place, which with everything in life, there's a time and a place. But if we're holding on to these values, so-called values that we talk about, honour.
But we pick and choose those values, don't we?
Exactly. Is it a buffet system?
Definitely. In my experience, we do pick and choose. We'll pick and choose what we like about those communities and what we want to let go or should let go. We're not letting go. For example, in my experience, and we can talk about the education system here and abroad. The young people abroad seem to be more flourishing than our young people here, because we're not investing the time in them, and we seem to be wanting to invest the time abroad. So where is the equality in that? You may have one individual one parent from abroad, but then why is it that our loyalties are still lying with the country that we've herited from?
How do you change that mindset?
It's changing very slowly, but it's like those families where it is changing, they've been tarred with a very bad brush, really.
So I mean, if you're going to ostracise these families, and these communities, there's not going to be anything really we're going to achieve in the. Is there any groups that we need to be looking up to, and saying people have moved on, but we haven't moved on? It's not a quick fix. You mentioned it's not a quick fix. In your humble opinion, who needs to take responsibility?
Everybody needs to take individual responsibility. I can't really say that it's so-and-so's responsibility and not somebody else's, because at the end of the day, we've got fantastic role models within our families, within our communities that we need to look up to and learn from them, which again, we take in things that we choose and are of personal benefit, and where we don't like what somebody else is doing, we'll use faith and religion, which, we're living double standard lives.
You mentioned the term double standards there, which we're going to come on to after the break as well. But thank you for Habiba for that. Viewers, there you go. We just started off with the topic about domestic violence because a refuge that Habiba's been working with and set up. But after the break, we will concentrate on the leadership and the more positive sides of getting our ladies to the pedestal who have done well and promoting their hard work. Where the credit is due, it needs to be given. So inshallah, see you after this short break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you. Not fair. Right.
Was that half an hour?
I think it's 7 minutes break, so 6:21. So I won't go back on till 6:30.
All right, okay.
Got that, yeah? I'm starting to feel myself going again. I have to wind myself back in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good that. We started off with so we'll move on to the
yeah, I have
side.
this debate. Even last night I was having this debate. I was saying to my husband's judge, why is it that we have these double standards? I said, I'm getting
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Viewers, welcome back to the show Real Talk with your host Amjad Ditter. Before the break, we were talking to Habib and Zaman, who's here talking about leadership, and especially from the BME communities, how we can do more to get our women recognised in all sorts of fields. The telephone lines are open, 01274 214 299, and it's also being streamed live on YouTube. If you can't make the programme after the show's gone, it will be uploaded onto YouTube as well. So we were talking before the break regarding domestic violence and domestic refuges and what we can do as a community to come out and stand firm and help these individuals to come through it. We're going to move on from that aspect now and go back over to Habiban, and we'll talk about how do we support these women, and talking about getting them into the roles where they are recognised in terms of leadership. In your service, if I can call it, how many of you seen go through the process who have actually said, these are our role models, these are our inspirations, this is why I want to be my mentor or coach?
Well, in terms of role models, I mean, there's very few that I've come across within my sort of working life. I mean, people do come to me looking at me as a role model, but in fact, within sort of our area, we have very few. So we need to be looking at more, we need to be training more, we need to be supporting more women to get into those roles for our future generations. Young girls are quite inspiring, that they aspire to many sort of positions within the communities, within the professions that they're wanting to go into. The only issue we have is that because those support mechanisms aren't there for them, they're looking to leave the area. So other areas are benefiting from the work that we've done within our own sort of communities or within our own families.
So what needs to be put in place, in your opinion, to help these people?
We need to invest more within our own communities, within our own families. At the end of the day, we know that women are aspiring to have certain roles and go into certain professions. So the more support we can give them, the more sort of networks we can have within local communities, like some of these community organisations, they have a role to play. They can offer training and support within those communities. They can get them involved within management committees, within sort of directors or trustees of those sort of organisations. So there's training that's available for them to develop the confidence, have the relevant sort of assertive skills that they need to challenge some of these groups or individuals that are in those sort of power positions, for them to get to those positions that they're aspiring to get to.
I'm going to wind it right back again, because that's what I do, unfortunately. What support can we give? If someone's like me who's watching and thinking, I'm not really educated, I haven't got academia behind me, I'm not really articulate, intellectual, no chance. So what can I do to help my family? There's a lot to be said for giving them time, giving them effort with the education, being there and giving them support and that encouragement, the ones that we probably didn't have who were growing up, for example, for a number of reasons. There's a lot to be said for that as well, isn't there? Rather than just focusing on the role models as such. It begins at home.
It begins at home, definitely. But say, for example, we have an individual within the community that's wanting to get involved in a local community group. They can start working with, like, maybe the nursery that they have in their neighbourhood. They might have a parents group or a parents forum that they can join. Just learn basic skills of communication, networking, getting to know others that are in that neighbourhood. And from that, they may get a position within one of the local establishments where they'll be able to get formal training and progress from there.
What onus do you put on the value of education? I just want to know your opinion regarding education, because with most things in life, everything or anything that you get for free, you generally don't value. And definitely, education for us, we're very lucky, and we've been granted it, and it's seen as a second-class citizen as such. It's just one of them things. You have to go to school. You have to do this. There's nothing such as a pride of achievement and going and giving that extra mile. I keep saying this, and it's my opinion, but our responsibility as parents doesn't stop at the doors or the gates of the school, does it? It starts from home. But do you think it's a community issue, that, or is it slowly phasing out?
I think, again, it varies family to family. Within sort of my family, I do put a lot of onus on my boys to make sure that they achieve well. My young one's going through GCSE at the moment, and the pressure that is being placed on his head, I'm just hoping that he does come out with good grades. Because at the end of the day, education is very important, particularly now. They've got to have those social skills as well as education. So it's so important that they get involved in local community life as well as having good education backing for them to progress to any decent university, because universities are looking at a variety of social skills that these individuals bring to them. So unless we put that priority onto young people that are going through the education system, we're not going to be achieving what we want to achieve. Because at the end of the day, you look generally at the economic status of the country, look at the amount of workless people that are around. The figures are rising on a daily basis. And unless those young people are able to have fantastic grades, fantastic university degrees, they're going to struggle. And if they're going to struggle to get decent jobs, they're going to be struggling within society as a whole. There's only so much parents can support them. They have to get on their own good footing.
Yeah, they have to take a sense of ownership, don't they, and do something for themselves as well. But like you mentioned, there's a fine line between having academic ability behind you and then having common sense, because they've still got to survive in the real world as such. So there's a fine balance, isn't there?
And it's parents that have to make sure that they are well-rounded individuals, and that's where the social skills come in, and ensuring that they are taking part in other community life as well as taking responsibility in home life. Budgeting is another area that I think we lack in training our children. Before we know it, they end up with their own family home and not knowing how to run the family home, not knowing how to run the budget within the household. They've got to have all those social skills and management skills to an extent to be able to manage life in the big world.
But to play devil's advocate, like I always do, if I was 8-year-old and I've been given an iPhone brand new and I've been in all the designer gear and I've always had everything made for me, I still know people at 25-year-old who get the beds made for them by the parents or the missus or whatever it is, and have no sense of responsibility. And that's a mindset. If you speak to them, it's not my job. So it needs to be instilled from a young age. Is that the key?
Of course it is. Well, the thing is, again, it's training your mind. As parents, that we have to get them into those positions where they are able to live in the big wide world. We can't be wrapping them up in cotton wool forever. They've got to flee the nest one day. So again, when we're talking about some of these issues that we're facing within the communities now, you'll hear individuals sort of saying, well, it was down to the parents, they didn't train them well. So that is why we've ended up with, domestic violence, for example. They've sort of been seen that kind of violence within their home life. So if we don't instill those skills within the young people now from a young age, they're not going to value life, they're not going to value the items that they're getting, because they're free handouts. We didn't have them when we were young children. We had to go and learn those social skills and make friends within the neighbourhood. We had to go out and play in the fields, whereas these days they're getting all these gadgets, PlayStations, the iPhones, the latest gear, so there's no value attached to that. So we've got to take some responsibility for that and nurture them in a way that they are going to become good adults.
On the level of communication is via socialising over an app. You see them stood at bus stops, and everyone's just on the phone. They've lost the gift of talking to people.
Definitely.
And it's a shame really, but it's a time and age we live in. Coming back to, because this programme is about leadership in ladies and women, in your opinion, professional or personal, what are the barriers holding our women back? And I say ours, I mean the collective BME. What is the barriers that are holding our people from being recognised and being promoted, in your opinion?
I think we still have that sort of sense that why are we putting a woman out, and particularly going out into the big wide world, it becomes a respect and honour thing. So we have to sort of change that mindset that women are equal.
Is this the same woman we can abuse mentally, physically?
Exactly.
But then we don't want to put them out because of honour?
Yeah.
So we pick and choose?
We pick and choose,
okay,
definitely. Yeah, we do pick and choose. But it's whatever suits us. And again, we operate in a double standard society. And I have real issues, because at times I kind of feel that, there's certain decisions we'll take that are immoral, but we do it to save the face of the community. and you know, for example, you may come across somebody that is consistently abusing that individual, but it becomes an honour thing. You look at somebody that may be wanting to go to university, and that individual may be dressing in a certain way, or it's inappropriate, and again it'll be, well, why is that individual being able to go to university or living in a modern lifestyle, or being able to live away from home? We do pick and choose, and internally I have real issues with that, because I kind of think, you know, we're being immoral, we're not being honest with ourselves. You know, what does our faith tell us? What does our sort of relationships within those families tell us? We have very biased views.
Is that the biggest barrier, you think, that's stopping our people from going forward?
Of course it is. Of course it is. And then again, if a woman is going to excel within a particular family, in my opinion, we should be doing all we can to invest in that individual and make sure that, you know, she's the bee's knees of that family, because at the end of the day, she's bringing respect into that family. She's the one that's the maker of that family, the maker of that community. Take myself, for example. You know, I was one of the first within our family to go to college, to go to university, and take up the position that I did. And, you know, in terms of youth and community work, it was one of those areas where very few women went into, particularly from the BME community. And on a national level, when I was visiting some of those conferences at that time, I kind of felt quite isolated, that, you know, have I chosen the right profession? And having that training behind me, I was able to put back into my own community. And you know, alhamdulillah, you know, I've helped hundreds of women, hundreds and thousands of women. Even now, on almost a daily basis, I'm picking up cases that, you know, are out of either domestic violence or forced marriage or abuse, self-harm, you name it, you know. And at times, you know, I will get comments at home as well. You know, you've come back from work, you're on the phone, but, you know, it's my passion. I have to make that difference to those individuals, because that's what I thrive on. Because, you know, until you don't take that stance within that family or that community, how are we going to change the behaviour of some of those individuals around us? Because, you know, it's one of those things that, well, it doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't matter to me because it doesn't affect me. And we've become very much like having a mindset that until it doesn't affect you personally, it's none of your business. Whereas, you know, at one time, you know, particularly when my father was around, I remember that he would sort of say that you have to make it your business, you know, because in order to progress and to support an individual, you have to make it your business. Whereas now, we've sort of, as sort of communities, taken that back seat. We see something on the road, you know, we might see drug dealing right outside our doorstep. We might see violence taking place on the doorstep. But then we'll say, well, actually, it's not our business. Let them carry on. You know, why are we getting involved? We start questioning ourselves and we start holding ourselves back. You know, we have to be forced right about it, because unless we start empowering some of these individuals, they're not going to be able to move on.
Absolutely. So if there's one thing I could take out of today's input, it would be, if the lady is the breadwinner of that house, there's nothing wrong with that, is there?
There is definitely nothing wrong with that. Because at the end of the day, she's bringing the money in. She's, you know, take myself, for example. I've worked all my life. I've been able to raise my children. I've been able to connect very well with the community. I've been able to develop projects, you know, outside of work, as well as, you know, keep those connections within the communities. And it's like, you know, I many times I'll get comments that, you know, you seem to attend every sort of funeral that you know of. You attend every birth that you seem to know of. Every friend that's in hospital, you know, you seem to have those, make the time to do those things. But why should you not? Because as a good Muslim, we are taught that, you know, you have to, our Prophet, and peace be upon him, he did those things, you know, looked after the vulnerable. It's our duty to ensure that, you know, we do put that time and effort in. Otherwise, we become self-centered individuals. And it's not just about bringing that money in and, you know, having a cozy life and having a nice sofa to sit on and, you know, having a plasma TV that you can sit and enjoy whatever curry or whatever. To me, that's not what life's about. You know, I have to keep myself motivated. I have to make sure that I put a smile on an individual's face on a daily basis. Otherwise, you know, putting your head on the pillow, it's like, well, have you really made use of your day today?
Well, you shouldn't be the exception. You should be the norm, Habiban, if you ask me. But in your lifestyle of going through all these academic qualifications and speaking to these groups of House of Parliament or whatever you've been, is there a sense of she's beneath me, she's a lady, and more importantly, she's BME, the sniggering, the comments, or the thinking you shouldn't actually be here because gender equality and etc. etc. Do you get that sense? Have you had that in your time, or as things moved on, have they progressed?
I still feel that, I on a sort of, I won't say sort of daily basis, but yeah, on a daily basis, if we can use that sort of terminology, I still face that gender inequality. I still face that racism from counterparts within those communities. All of a sudden, I've become a big threat, particularly since, having those received the awards. It's like I've become a prominent individual. Whereas, to me, the awards don't mean anything. It's whatever you are as an individual, however you live your life and however you lead your life. That is what the way you are. The things I feel passionate about, I will get involved. But I don't feel like I'm undercutting somebody or I'm wanting to override somebody. I'm willing to work with everybody. I'm willing to work in partnership with people. So why should people feel that you are a threat to them?
Do you have to justify yourself? And do you feel as though you have to work twice as hard to get somewhere? Or do people look at you and think, you only got there because you're a lady, and more importantly, you only got there because you're BME, not because of your credibility or your work ethic or because of your abilities? Did you see what I mean?
Well, let's put it this way, Amjad, the glass ceiling is still far too high for us to be able to break that glass ceiling. But when we are not supporting that individual within those communities, we bring up all sorts of domestic issues and to ensure that those individuals or those women are not going to progress, then we can't just be sitting and blaming the establishment, because we have to start working within. We have to start supporting the communities within. And it's so much easier to sort of say, well, it's institutional racism. Yeah, it is to an extent. But we have to take that responsibility for that progression ourselves.
If I can ask you, who was your role model? Who is your mentor? Who would you aspire to be? Because everyone has somebody they want to be, if they have any aspiration in life. Who was yours, apart from your parents?
Well, my mother's been the biggest inspiration for us, sort of working around the clock, and bless her, with poor health at the moment, she still has that sort of sense of responsibility that she should be getting up and doing things. I take that from her. But then my sort of role model passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, but she became a very close sort of mother figure who got me through the sort of ranks and supported me within my sort of personal development. And she was someone who was very much into women's work and girls' work. So I took my passion from her, really. There was a lot of skills and opportunities that I took from learning from her.
I mean, the show is not about the subject I'm going to mention now, but whilst you're on that subject, if you don't mind talking about it, how important is the respect of the parents and the teachers and the peers and the people who influence us? Because have you seen in the youth generation, the younger generation, we seem to be losing that sense of appreciation for the ones who've helped us throughout our lives. Again, we talked about this. How much of that did carry through for the rest of your life, and how important is it to have that?
Well, to me, it's very important, because that's the way I've been brought up. My parents had that sort of instilled deep into my roots from a very young age. And even now, Mum will always say, you've got to have respect for your teacher, for your ustad, for your parents, and so on. But young people these days, we're spoiling them too much. Again, we're going back to our earlier sort of discussion, all these gadgets that they're getting. We kind as parents, we're spoiling them because we cannot feel that we didn't get those opportunities, so we need to give them those opportunities. But at the same time, we don't realise how they don't appreciate those, because it's like easy handouts. And once you're getting those easy handouts, it's like you don't strive for anything. Whereas, when I first started working, it was like, what is it that I want to pay for out of my own money? Whereas young people these days don't have those aspirations, because they know mum and dad will provide it for them. So why is there a need to have that respect for those parents? Because they don't mean anything to them. And again, I think we're trying to struggle, or we are struggling to sort of compete in a modern society, for example. you know, we say going to the madrasa after school is like too long. We did it, but our parents didn't say, you know, you're having to go. We even had to go on a Saturday morning, and sometimes even on a Sunday morning. And now when you kind of look back at, you know, how did we do it? And yet, you know, we seem to be making excuses for our children that, you know, they're going to school, they're very tired, they can't do a 2-hour session.
Just hold that 2-hour session, just a call waiting. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, I've just been listening. You're just talking about, you know, these parents are handing out iPhones and Samsungs and what have you, spoiling them. Now, I'm bringing 14-year-old. The problem we are having is there's too much peer pressure. How do you deal with that? They're coming home, they're saying everybody's got this, everybody getting this much spending money. Children are going out with, you know, £10, £15 daily with spending money, majority. Now, how do you deal when they come home? The majority, they're saying everybody's doing it. Now, how can we, you know, teach our child? You can't really hold back from them, not giving them, you know.
Yeah, well,
I want to know how you can deal with this situation, because I've got 30-year-old. Time were different then. There's not many people went into giving a lot of spending money. Now times have changed. The majority are doing it. And if a minority is trying to do it, you are getting peer pressure and they're coming home and rebelling.
yes, that's very true. And I want to go over to Habib and hopefully she'll answer the question. So Habib, I mean, we talked about this. Do you want to be the exception, or do you want to be the norm? Or do you want to conform, or do you want to be ostracised? These are the words.
Yeah, in fact, I agree with the brother that's phoned in, and thank you for your call. I can accept that, yes, we are living in a society where there is a lot of peer pressure. But again, it's like befriending that individual. That just because your peers are carrying a certain gadget doesn't mean to say you have it. And having that appreciation for the family income, because these days we seem to be living beyond our means. You know, on a sort of constant basis, I hear that families are having to take out loans because they can't afford certain things. You know, just for weddings, for example, you know, we're spending extortionately. So we have to live within our means. It's not a case of, you know, the peer pressure is there and that's why we have to do what we have to do. It's about supporting that individual child to ensure that, you know, they are conforming to certain standards that their family is expecting them to.
As a parent, as a family, can we get too intrusive into our children's lives, do you think? Or do you think we need to, otherwise, if we don't guide them, someone else will? Someone else will,
yeah. From my experience of youth work, you know, we have to support them. We have to offer that supporting role. We have to befriend that child.
Thank you. We're sorry to cut you off. Just another call waiting. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. I just want to carry on from the previous caller and ask you a question in terms of how much of an effect it makes in different communities due to the fact that there's so much difference now between the rich and poor, and some expectations in terms of peer pressure where you'll have a rich child and a poor child going to school, but there's so much pressure on the poor children or poor families' parents to meet and keep up with the Joneses, as he was. And that's another thing. And then also to the sister, Habib, and well done to her in terms of the role in leadership, all the best. But how much of a struggle was it for her? That's a personal question, in terms of getting to where she was. Oh, she can answer that.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll answer that for you straight away. So, Habib, the 2 questions. You've heard them both, so I'll give it straight over to you.
Well, for me personally, it has been a struggle. But like I say, you know, if you don't have that support from your family and from your extended family as well, for me, my family have been the backbone for where I am today, in terms of just a general support. You know, it's like raising 2 children and working full time. You have to juggle all those balls because, you know, it's like having certain expectations of that individual as well as living in the community, because, you know, the sort of community that I live in, there are expectations of individuals and having to conform to certain identities as well. So it's not been easy, and without the support of the family, I wouldn't be where I am. and particularly, like I mentioned before, my mum. My mum lives with me. My mum has always been there, and having to raise the children, I've not been one of those that's kind of like thought, well, you know what, I need a childminder or I need to put them in childcare because this is what I have to do. You've got to have that backing, and particularly eyes at the back of your head, because you could be running here, there, and everywhere and losing sight of what's going on in your family home. So it's just really important to have that family backing.
And how does that transfer into your work life, like the caller mentioned, the struggles you faced in your professional life? How do you cope with that? Is there a coping mechanism? What do you turn to when you face the challenges?
You turn to mum. Mum is the person that you turn to. And alhamdulillah, I'm lucky that she's still around, and she's the one that will carry the can in any sort of situation. Because again, I refer back to having a family. If for example I've got an evening meeting, it's like I've got to look for childcare, and you can't be that I'm relying on my husband to make sure that the kids are going to be fed or looked after. You've got to balance that life. There's been times where I've had to get up early, ensure that the house is clean, the food is cooked, and ensure that all my chores are done before I can actually go out and do what I'm doing. So it's been a struggle, but alhamdulillah, I've survived it. I'm where I am today with the blessing of my mum.
So if you can do it, then there's no excuse for anybody else to say, I can't do it, because you've faced the same struggles as hundreds of others and thousands of others women have as well. So
childcare is the biggest, really, because once you've got children, they've got to be a priority in your life. You've got to make sure that you're giving them the level of education and the support and meeting their needs and ensuring everything is spot on for them. But at the same time, making sure that you're balancing your life with everything else that's going on around you.
So moving forward, as a community, what is the top priority you think we can do as a community to get everyone involved and move forward collectively? What's the biggest thing that's holding us back, in your opinion?
We've got to look at what is happening within our communities. First of all, we've got to start having an interest in what's going on in the local communities. Even now, you come across families where, you're going in and they're watching channels from abroad. So they won't even know what's going on in their own community. So, first and foremost, we have to get that right. We have to start having that interest within our own communities. We start within the education system. That's a big one, really, for me. Getting more governors on board in local schools. Of
course. And Habiba, on that note, we could be here for ages talking, but thank you so much for coming and taking part in the show. It's been really appreciated, so thank you and Jazakallah for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Viewers, there you go. We talked about leadership. Inshallah, next week, same time, same show, different subject. I shall see you then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That worked so fast.